Uh, how does this film, which is now 27 years old, 26 years old, it's 2007, so 20 years old something.
A bit less. So let's say 15.
Is it?
2017.
Musicians do maths.
16.
He's now got a degree in all this, or he's working on it anyway. Well, I'm glad. That's a good start. But how does this? You've done so many films now, and had done even by the time you did this. So how does this, insofar as you can answer this question, how does this rank in your pantheon of Marianelli film scores?
Oh, pretty high, I should think.
I'm very glad to hear
it. I mean, the thing is that I don't know if you have this syndrome, but I'm never happy with what I do. I always think is rubbish, and I'm no use, and I don't know how to write music, and then occasionally I finish something, and then it goes out, and then people respond in at some level, and they occasionally they tell me I've done a good job, and then I think, oh really? Oh okay, let me watch again, and so then I believe them. I allow myself to believe people if they tell me, and this particular movie, together with another couple, the music attracted so much attention. I'm sure it's because it's played very loud in the film. But it was easy to believe, when people react in that way.
He's a typically modest response, because obviously he won his Oscar for this, and plus other nominations you had. This is one of my absolute favourite film scores.
I'm so glad to hear.
Well, it is. And I want to try and explain why, because I don't know how many. Can I ask how many of you had seen the film before tonight? Quite a lot of you. So you possibly had an opportunity to listen to the music perhaps a bit more than you might have done if you had never seen the film before, because you're trying to cope with the story and the time. This is a unique movie from a musical point of view. I can't think of anything else.
You're right.
Yeah.
It presented unique opportunities also because of the story. You can play with levels of reality. Who's doing the watching? Who's doing the hearing? And where is the truth? If we can talk about truth in a story that we watch, performed by actors and written by a writer, and so there were so many layers of truth and so many perspectives, and so the opportunity to get in with the music and play with those perspectives and those layers was irresistible, really.
Okay.
It could have fallen flat on its face, and we did consider at some point, that maybe having the typewriter merging from the frame to the score and backward, and lots of different places where it's not exactly clear whether the score is inside there or is out here, whether it could register to an audience as a bit of a gimmick, really, a bit of a forced reading, in imposing. But if you don't do it on this kind of film, where do you do it? So
yes, every time I see it, there's something new, something I missed. I should first of all explain, let's talk about the structure of it, because it offered you a singular opportunity. There are 4 sections, as you know, you've just seen for the film. The music this is the most obvious thing. Once you've seen it, you know that the music in the first section with Saoirse Ronan as Bryony is not repeated until the third section. The second section has an entirely different thematic and musical has material. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
How did you just come up with that one day? Did it emerge from conversations with Joe Wright, or?
I think it's fair to say that it happened partially by trial and error, and for a long time I was convinced that there should be some of the new material that comes in the second section should be pre-echoed. And specifically, I wrote a piece that ended up in the soundtrack album, but it's not in the film, but is the piece that in fact has become the Puccini, the record player. And I wanted to get it in there as well. I wanted the record to play again with this, the idea that the music is everywhere and a part of the story and ties everything together. And in my mind, in the record, there would have been this love song that then becomes their love song later. But I think Joe's instinct, in the end, I wrote a piece, I recorded it, and we went along thinking eventually we would use it. And Joe was always doubtful about that. It seemed one too many times that we would pull that trick, that we would just force the music, the score, somehow into it. And so because that was the only piece really that I was planning to have in the first section that went, so as a result, all the new ideas for the love story come in the second section.
Well, I'm very glad it was cut because
I lost to Puccini.
Yeah,
I mean, could be worse.
Who cares? Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's tremendous because I presume once the Puccini was in, did you do a certain amount of weaving around the Puccini?
Yeah, I remember dealing with it in some way, and I can't remember exactly. At some point, I had to edit my music, but I can't remember exactly. I remember spending time trying to see if I could chop Puccini around, and you can't. I mean, so I had to adjust to him, right? Yeah.
But the only reason I mentioned it is because in the great sequence, the Steadicam sequence on Dunkirk / Redcar Beach, you absolutely do that with the hymn. Oh God, I Hope in Ages Past. The cue is going along this beautiful cue, and then this choir starts, and you effortlessly harmonise to that.
I can tell you, it was a lot of effort.
I'm very glad to hear it. I'm very glad because, of course, the effect is dazzling. How long did that take? It must have been ages.
Now this is like revealing tricks after a magic.
Yeah,
show,
good. Let's do that. It's Penn and Teller talk. Yeah.
I don't know. The idea came quite early to me about getting in there with the music and merging with the choir, and Joe resisted it for a long time. Like he resisted My Love theme as well. I'll tell you in a moment. But he was very resistant to the idea that I would try to amplify the emotion that was already in the scene and in the choir. And I suppose he already knew that he wanted to show off with that scene, and he didn't want anybody else to show off as well, right? Yeah, that was his, so he tried to keep me out of it, and then eventually I kept telling him, let me try something. I've got this idea, that Robbie, the sense of being spaced out would be much more powerful if the music is at odds with the chaos that you see. And so if you start with something that is really, really slow and dreamy, and then there is this biblical scene in front of you, there's a pull in between the music and what you see that is going to be felt. I was quite sure of that. So there was at one point he relented. He gave me a call. He said, "Okay, I think I'm ready to listen what you've got to offer, and do you want to have a go?" and I don't know if this is funny for you, but every time I think about this one, I find it really funny that I was telling you, I was working on 3 other movies at the time, and that, I wasn't so keen that my other directors would know that I was working on lots of things. But when Joe rang, I was in the middle of working on a horror movie. It was, and I said, Joe, I'm sorry, I'm not in my studio today. I can't work. I'll try something tomorrow. But I was working madly on this horror movie, and then I finished the cue and I emailed it to the director, except that I emailed it to the wrong director, right? It went to Joe. He very very dry, very laconic. He replied, "Nice idea, I think, but I don't think this is for me, really." And so very very ashamed. I think I spent the night up, trying to catch up and being able to send something in the morning. Atonement, yes. So the morning after, I sent this new piece with the first go at this idea, but it wasn't this piece. So the idea was there: start slow, start dreamy, spaced out, then merging with the choir. But it was a bit clunky. It wasn't quite working. But Joe very rightly said, I think the idea is good. I think you need to work more on this. And so I took a couple of days off, and it was fun, actually. It was a bit of a puzzle. The choir was in there, and you see their mouth. So you're bound to write something that stays around what they did. And what I did was to play along with the singing, so that I had a track that I could then repeat backwards 2 or 3 times, and so I could start the piece much earlier and always stay with the line of the singing, so that when I would find eventually the choir, I was already with the singing. I didn't have, I mean, you wouldn't know, but if you were to copy this song 2 or 3 times backward, the whole cue always stays with it, and it works from beginning to end. Even when you lose the singing, it would still work. And that's how it was done. And then you could just fade in the choir wherever you wanted. It didn't matter. It would always work. It would always work. Yeah.
Well, it's terrific. It's an amazing achievement. One thing I noticed watching it tonight that I hadn't noticed before, oddly enough, is that you have slightly prefigured that cue just before they get to the Dunkirk beach.
That's right.
So presumably you wrote that cue with all its immense complication, and then slotted it in early.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's full of carefully placed things like that. One of the things that you haven't done is to write a character theme for Bryony and a character theme for Cecilia and a character theme for Robbie. I read an interview with you way back that said that you're not that kind of composer. You don't really like working in that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult to make hard and fast rules especially for this job. I suppose I grew up with an idea that this is hard to explain, but sooner or later, whenever I talk, I end up talking about Beethoven. So let's just get it out. All right, yeah. So. There's something in the music I was listening a lot to, and especially Beethoven, that is has a ethical quality, and this is hard to explain for me because I know what I mean, but hard to put in words. But the themes are not really characters, like people, like they could be Peter and Wolf. Like there's the duck, and there's the cat, and there's Peter, and there's the wolf, and they're more like ethical qualities. There's an assertive principle, and there is an imploring principle, and there is and they fight it out. They talk to each other. But the beautiful thing for me of realizing this, that these are abstract ideas. They're universals. And you can give them a voice. You can give them a sound. And to me, that is much more interesting than giving a sound to a character that is already played by someone on the screen. It's there already. Why do you need me?
Why do they
I
need
mean,
you
Peter
to-
and Wolf is. Maybe you need it because it's a ballet and there's very little in terms of storytelling, and the themes need to tell you who's who. But here you know who's who. You definitely don't need it. How much more interesting to think about, I don't know, destiny and fortune and will, and maybe some little demons that point the way here or there, because they're watching the chorus in the Greek tragedy. They watch and empathize, but not even too much, from a distance, but they help you kind of directing your gaze, maybe, and maybe not even that. Just offer you another. I mean, to give you, like, the perfect example for me would be in Anna Karenina. There is a point where the Keira Knightley actually is on her own she's with Vronsky on a field, and then suddenly she feels guilty, and she suddenly looks up, like she's looking at God, but we see her looking up from above. The camera's gone up, and you have to ask yourself, who's watching, who's doing the watching? Is it God? Is it her own conscience? But it's definitely not her. It couldn't be her theme. Is something or someone else watching what's happening.
Well, there's a very interesting comparable moment. There were several very interesting comparable moments in this. The first time you've heard that collection of ideas around Brian at the beginning of the film, the next time you hear it, it's Cecilia running through the woods with flowers. And if you're on this is X's theme, if you think it's Bryony's, it isn't. But it may be that Bryony is watching Cecilia, and maybe the whole thing is Bryony watching. It deepens the levels and the layers that you've been talking about.
Yeah, I think that theme in particular, the theme that opens the film, came out. I wrote it before the film was shot, and by the way, it was played. Joe played it on the stage when he was shooting the film, and so when you see Cecilia going down the stairs, when you see Bryony going down the stairs and walking really fast through the house, and then opening the door again, the music was kind of giving the rhythm. There are a few moments where she really is walking with her. I didn't do it after. I didn't put the music to match her step. It was the other way around. The music was there while she was walking. And I think that theme came out of a sense of partially a little bit of autism that I think she might have, a little touch of obsessiveness about things, that where she gets stuck. She gets stuck, right? Her mind goes in very small loops, and she finds it difficult to let go of things. So there was this mechanical quality, but definitely there was the sense that this could also represent a little bit some inevitability of things that move too fast for people even to do anything about it. Yeah. Everything is kind of going the way it goes, and there's, call it destiny. I don't know, but yes. So I always stay a little bit further away from the character if I can. It's also really complicated when you have themes for characters, because then you've got two characters in a scene. So which one do you play? You know.
Yeah, it's a kind. I think it is a reductive way of approaching things, but it's what I call Star Wars syndrome, with huge respect to everybody involved in that. But it is that kind of a kind of misunderstanding of Wagner and the leitmotif.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So Wagner would write themes for other things.
Exactly.
Exactly what I'm saying. Yes. Yeah. Yes. The poison, or the or destiny, or
yes.
The guilt, the theme for guilt. Yeah, they're abstract qualities. That's the ethical quality of music, which I think is really important.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I'm going to open it up in a minute, I promise. But one of the other things I note about your work in general, but certainly on this, is it's what I would call romantic. It is not in a negative way. It is directly feeling. It is very feeling based, especially in something like the second part of this, that one might loosely call a love theme. It never resolves, and it has this strange yearning quality to it. And I hate applying words like that to music, but it definitely has, and it's in spades in the end, where it feels like over the credits, where it's this beautiful duet for piano and cello. It's a deeply felt romantic thing. The only other composer I think who's so unafraid is Alberto Iglesias, who is the Almodovar composer.
It's my great hero.
Oh, well, there you are.
I wanted to be him when I grew up. And like, yeah.
But do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah,
there is
completely.
A direct quality, a fearless, emotional quality.
There is that, and also the refusal to resolve things, which I just can't. I'm not able to resolve things, and it just feels fake when there is a proper ending to things. Life is not like that. Life goes on, doesn't it? And so should music, you know.
Yeah, it's a kind of eternal soundtrack. It just goes on forever. And
a little bit of avoiding going where you expect it to go, just with the harmony. I mean, not too much, but enough to make you feel that there's still more to come. It's not over. Right. That piece for piano and cello, by the way, was one of the early things that I wrote before the film was shot. I wrote a number of themes before the film was shot, based on the novel, which is what I do with Joe very often. So he would get in touch with me very early, and he did that on every film we worked together. I just start sending ideas to him. Very early on, he played to me some cello and piano sonatas by Schumann that he had heard, and he had put together kind of slideshow of war pictures, and he had put this music, and I thought, yeah, that's interesting. That yearning, that romantic feel seemed to go very well with it. And then we could never find a place where to put this piece. I loved it, and Joe loved it. The editor loved it. We were trying to smuggle it into the film, but it wouldn't go. And so we kept it for the credits in the end. Yeah.
Well, it's a very worthy place for it. It's beautiful. Anyway, shut up, Gary. Do you have any questions for Dario? I'd be very glad. Yes, sir. The microphone will come to you.
Thank you very much. This is my second time seeing it, and a lot more came out the second time around. But very quick question is, are there tunes in your head that sit there for years and you say, here's a little bit of a tune. I can drop it into this film perfectly?
That happens very rarely. It has happened occasionally. One of my earliest film, I was on set, and the main theme of the score came to me as I was there. I had to find a piece of paper and scribble a few lines down and write it down. But that is really rare for me. Usually things come when I'm in front of a keyboard and I put my hands down, and I almost think with my hands. Not always. Sometimes I have quite a clear idea of what I'm after, and then I start looking for it on the piano. But equally, I start playing, thinking about the themes, the literary themes of the story, and then I gradually start spiraling around something, and that something becomes clearer as I play with it. Hard to talk about these things in words. But no, although I have bits of music playing in my head all the time, they're already been written. I can't use them. They're usually Bach or Beethoven, or it's very annoying.
And you find out.
Yeah. What happens often is that when I'm ready to write music, I usually go around and I walk whistling, and I improvise whistling. I don't whistle anything particular, but I whistle a lot. Very irritating. But I kind of know that I'm ready to write a new score when that happens, because then gradually I get into the writing and the whistling stops. I have my head full of bits of what I'm writing or other music, but I have to stop whistling. It's an interference, and then so I know that I'm ready to write the next one when I start whistling.
That's a signal.
again.
It's like a kettle whistling.
Yeah.
You know that.
No, it's more tuneful than that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's time to pour.
Thank you
for that. Who else has got a question? Who else? Yes, there's one. Several now. Hotting up.
Big honour to be in this room with you. As soon as I heard that typewriter when I saw it originally, I thought it was genius. And Annika and Pride and Prejudice, incredible. Two questions. One, you sort of alluded to it, but how much notice do you normally get to create a score? Because I thought normally it seems that the film is made, then the film's thrown at the composer and they've got 2 months or 3 months. And which do you prefer? Do you prefer Joe Wright's way or that way? And secondly, Gary encouraged us to really listen to the credits music, which was incredible. But how do you score credits? I get how you score images and a film, but how do you go about scoring credits?
Yeah, so I have in the past liked starting very early on a movie, and I made a point of telling directors that is much better, and especially with Joe, with another couple of directors who accept to work in that way. The great thing is that we don't have to contend with temporary music too much, because I mean so early that my themes already, my ideas start going in, even before the film is shot, like in this case, and that's. I hope you all know what I'm talking about when I say temporary music, but if you don't, editors put music from other movies while they're editing the film, just to help themselves with pace, and it causes invariably havoc with everybody, because everyone gets used to what's there after a few repeated listenings, and to dislodge it is really hard. So that's one of the reasons why I like starting early. Occasionally and recently, in fact, you get bitten because the movie takes so long to come together, and the editing process is so, I would say, violent in a sense. There are convulsions, in the way the story is cut up and reassembled, that it's kind of soul destroying, trying to stay with it through these convulsions. So I don't know. I'm almost changing my mind about telling people that I want to start early. Recently, I'm having a hard time on something, but I think it's different starting early because you got a better chance not to end up with something that sounds like decoration. To put in, very shortly, is there and is so part of what you're experiencing. It's another, to use a cliche, is another character in the movie. It's under the skin of the movie. I can only think in cliches right now, right? But anyway, it belongs. It's found its way together with the editing of the film, with the conception of the film. If you've been so lucky to be called, before the film is shot. So it's the end result is much better. It's a lot more work. But having said that, occasionally, and this is the answer to your second question, you get called at the last minute or even after the last minute because they've already tried the composer and it didn't work out, and they've used all the time they had, and now there's going to be 4 weeks left before the final dub, and you have to just do the whole score in 4 weeks, and then you do it in 4 weeks, and you still try not to make it sound like a decoration.
And the end credits.
And the end credit, yes, the end credits. So if I have the energy and the time, I really like writing a new piece of music for the end credits. It's kind of hard on the really big movies because you've already written an hour and 30 or an hour and 45 minutes of music. You are totally exhausted, and they were editing until the last minute, and you were staying up the night, and then so writing an extra piece for the credit is kind of tough. On this, I really thought it was important, and it wasn't the last piece you hear was really meant to take that theme you heard at the beginning and do something else with it. That was, in my mind, meant that theme that was really unsettled. Da da dee da 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 dee da. No, if it's major, it's in minor. It's the rhythm is but it finds some kind of peace. It finds some acceptance, which was the whole point of the whole film, is to atone. Have you atoned? Well, she has kind of in her own mind, but so the music kind of needs to travel there, and it needs to go there as well. And so I thought it was really important that very unsettled theme would find some kind of settled way to express.
It's interesting that you can kind of tell whether the composer has been able to make that extra journey, or whether the composer has left, because often they'd have left by the time this happens, whether they've handed it over to the sound editors, the music editors, to sort out from bits that you've already heard in the movie. You can generally tell. This feels very composed, and I encourage people to stay because the score is incomplete unless you listen to it. If you leave early, the emotional journey is not complete. At least that's the way I feel it. I don't know whether you think that.
Yeah, I always feel like that in any film. I mean, I always drive my family mad that they want to go home, and I want to stay until it's properly finished. And I'm always the last one to leave the cinema.
Yeah.
But it's a different. It's there for a reason.
Well,
also, just read the names of the people that worked. They've given a bit of their lives.
Yes,
to
exactly.
this.
And now these credit sequences at the end are longer and longer and longer than ever. I think that's a good thing personally, because in the Hollywood days, you would see just heads of department. Actually, it doesn't do justice to the industry that's going on. At least that's what I see. More questions. There's this one here, there's one there. Whoever you're near, I'll bear you in mind. Yes.
You mentioned that you know you're ready to write another score when you start whistling. So, if you're not whistling, do you turn work down? And how do you get yourself to the place where you are whistling again? Or if you've got to do a job, how do you get through that?
Well, I can't force myself to get to the place where I whistle again. That just happens. I mean, I could force myself to whistle, but it's not quite the same thing. What I was talking about is just catching myself whistling after not having been whistling for a while, and then interpreting it as a sign. I guess I choose to interpret it that way. But no, I don't wait for the whistle to come before I take on another job. I mean, I hope the music will come, in some way. Usually, I spend a great part of my working life saying yes to everything, so that wasn't really an issue. In the last few years, I've been able to choose a little bit more, and so I kind of there are certain type of stories that I respond to, and also certain type of directors that I respond to. Sometimes the story is not so interesting, but the director is, and so that's enough. And with this kind of work, you have to take the gamble. You just dive in without really knowing what you're going to do. In fact, you don't really know until you've finished what you will do, and hope for the best. It's really good actually to see something that worked out okay. When I'm in the middle of something that looks like it's really not working at the moment, think, okay, well, no, but sometimes it does work out, and I was able to do it at some point. Maybe I can do it again. But it when you're in the middle of it, and those of you who do either write music or do something creative, you must know when you're right in the middle of it, you're in the dark. You don't know what the next note should be. Is it going to be an F sharp? What do I know? Yes. I mean, it has to be something, but until you've written it, you don't really know. I guess experience helps to shorten the time when you're a little more sure that you've done something decent, at least, that you can play to your director. But again, until you played it to someone else, you don't really know the way it will read. It will register. Maybe you think you've written masterpiece, and the director thinks, I think you need to do a bit more work. And
yes, it's pretty terrifying. I have a colleague, American composer, who writes hundreds and hundreds of demo tracks and sends them off to the director. It must be incredibly exhausting to do that. But he's young, so that would he's all right. He can catch up on his sleep. Yes, ma'am.
Is this working? Oh, thank you. So, thank you so much for answering the question. So, I understand that you've obviously studied in both Firenze and London, so it was never just Italia. But we're just wondering, do you think your Italian heritage has influenced your musical career or your composition in any sort of way? You don't have to say yes, by the way, if there isn't, because I understand people don't necessarily have to have some sort of attachment to their heritage. Grazie mille.
The truth is, I'm not sure. I mean, I would be surprised. I'd be surprised if it didn't affect me in some way, having been born and grown up there. I mean, if anything, I was exposed when I was a kid in the 60s and the 70s to very particular music from television that was very Italian. Now I recognize as very Italian. It's like nothing else. There's is slight cheesiness, but very sophisticated, and it's easy, but it's not banal. And at least for a bunch of composers that I liked when I was a kid. So I'm sure that did have an influence, like a number of other things. Sometimes I think about, especially Tuscan cuisine. It's very simple. You use the garlic and that's the piccolo, by the way, in the orchestration, and you use simple ingredients, and you don't jumble up. You don't try to hide the taste too much. And I guess for me, that is my musical taste as well. I like to write music where you know what you're listening to all the time, and so I have great trouble sometimes writing music that is more atmospheric and minimalistic and kind of holds some kind of atmosphere. I find it really, really hard. It just feels like cooking French instead of it's not me. However, my parents were they are great music lovers, but the music we listen at home was not Italian music. It was Brahms and Bach and Beethoven and Mozart and Debussy, a lot of Wagner. So that was my musical education. I played the piano very rarely. I played Italian music. I played Austrian, German, French music mostly. So who knows? I think there must be something there from Italy, but I don't know what that could be.
It's curious you ask, because the great theme, the one that goes around the Dunkirk beach, I when I first watched it, I thought, my gosh, he's completely channeled Elgar there. There's something absolutely beautiful like the cello concerto, but as I've seen it more and more and more, I think that's true anymore. I think there's a kind of universality about it that is not even attempting. That's
that's a tricky one, because there's Parry in there as well, and there's a hymn. The hymn is a beautiful, by the way, is a gorgeous theme written by Hubert Parry, who knew how to write tunes, and so if there is a Britishness in there, I mean, it's bang in the middle, and so everything I've done around, I don't know, it kind of maybe an amplification, and a slightly devious amplification in the sense that it never makes it settle. It contradicts partially the harmony that Hubert Parry had put in the original.
I think I mention it only because these categories that we're talking about, in a way, that I find myself resorting to them the first time I encounter something, as I try and make sense of it the first time, whether it's a film but the more I get to know something, the less these categories seem to be meaningful. I don't know whether you have that experience.
You mean Italian as opposed to...
Not just that, also genre things.
Right.
Like, this is a this and that is a that. This is tonal, that is not.
Yeah, I guess that's the way we help ourselves to put in language things that are very difficult to talk about. But yes, I think you're right. I mean, there's always... The intestine bit is in the in-between, isn't it? Is the shades of grey. The category is less intestine. It's a bit...
Yes, and the same is true in our relationships with people. You make an assessment that could be based on all kinds of things, but the more you get to know somebody, the more complex it becomes, and the more it eludes a category. Anyway, a deep philosophical note. Anybody else? I think this would probably have to be our last one, if there is anybody. Can you see anybody, Millie? Oh yes, there. Good, excellent. You're our last.
I wonder if I could kind of circle back to the first question and go back to silence. I'm really intrigued by how you look at silence in your scoring of the film, because it felt a lot of the time as though the score was kind of bearing the burden of communication for the characters who seem unable to communicate, and unable to tell the truth. And it felt as though when they did tell the truth in the letter, and when Bryony visits Cecilia, it felt as though suddenly the score disappeared and we had silence. So yeah, I wonder what your thoughts on silence are.
Well, it's an interesting question. That comes from a conversation with the director. It's definitely not the composer who says, although I do say occasionally, we should not have music here. Mostly I'm ignored when I say these things, yeah. But occasionally I do convince the director to have silence where I think there should be silence. In fact, I have a director, Michael Caton-Jones, who tells me that my work for him, the best thing I ever done was the pieces where I put the silence, where I didn't write the music. I'm never sure that he really means it as a compliment. But it's so I would say the most important things in the music probably, and I'm probably talking rubbish now, but it's late at night, and so be it. But I think the places where the music stop and is followed by silence, and the places where the music starts and is preceded by silence are possibly more important than the piece of music. I mean, you could, if you choose the right moment to come in with the music, it's so obvious. Well, it's so obvious. It's not that obvious, but even if the audience doesn't register consciously, but you're making a big statement just by starting something or stopping something, then okay, well, this statement might be of a type or another, but you've already made a statement by starting. So I follow my instinct, and I try to convince people that my instinct is right. Sometimes I'm able to, but what you hear in the final product is the result of conversation where I would like the music to be. Sometimes it goes exactly there, and sometimes it doesn't.
It's a great question, and to me, again, one thing that is exceptional about this is the sensitivity of what's called the spotting, where the music starts, where the music is and where the music is not. It seems to me to be particularly expressive and effective. For example, an example is the scene of the French soldier dying in the hospital. No music there. I can imagine, if you imagine the worst kind of Hollywood movie, just imagine this film with the wrong kind of score, and you would hear in these passages you're describing, in that wonderful scene with the two sisters that's imagined, we later discover, when Bryony goes to repent. If that had music, what the hell would that be? And they rightly...
and how beautiful in that moment they talk about the little French piece that the sister plays, and then the scene finishes, and then you have the Claire de Lune, and then you have the photograph in black and white of the real war, the real soldiers. It's so spot on. I wish I could have gone in there and write a piece of music that did that, but I there was no chance.
No, your taste and good judgment was that you shouldn't.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that was the perfect place for a little piece by Debussy.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of, and the La Bohème, the Puccini that you mentioned, the Maurice Chaubert music in the excerpt from Quai de Brume is another little example of something that's just left in there.
So maybe the last little anecdote about this very topic, but I, in my presumption, I also wanted to get in the dormitory where the girls, the nurses, at night they're dancing. There's a gramophone, and they're dancing to a song, a wartime song. And of course, I wanted to get in there as well. There's a record playing. I'll write. We tied it all together as the theme, is the love theme, and except that Joe was quite convinced that we should be in the here and now right at that point, and so it should be a real wartime or maybe slightly early 1930s song that was famous at the time. And what you hear is sung by Flanagan and Allen, Miss You, right? And so I said, no, but this is the perfect place to plant our love theme. And he thought, yeah, that's a brilliant idea. We'll use the Flanagan and Allen theme as the main theme for the whole thing. And I thought, oh damn, right. So for the next, so I really wrote a song. I commissioned a writer to write the lyrics, and I did it. And this song had a similar rhythm to the real one. But I couldn't quite let it go, and so for the next few months, every time there was a love scene or something that warranted the more romantic treatment, let's call it, Joe wanted the Flanagan and Allen theme, and so I had to produce cues, pieces of music using that theme. And then on the side, I would just slip in Dario's version. This is Dario's tune for the same. So I wrote double, all for every cue I would propose two, and then eventually, I don't know, I wore him out. He had enough of me, and he let me have my theme for the thanks God. But that was the story of the love theme.
Very interesting. You heard it all here. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us this evening and for your wonderful questions, and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Dario Marianelli.
Thank you.